Is time travel possible? Short answer, yes. And you're doing it right now, hurtling into the future at the impressive rate of 1 second per second. You're pretty much always moving through time at the same speed, whether you're watching paint dry or wishing you had more hours to visit with a friend from out of town. But this isn't the kind of time travel that's captivated countless science fiction writers or spurred a genre so extensive that Wikipedia lists over 400 titles in the category Movies About Time Travel. In franchises like Doctor Who, Star Trek, and Back to the Future, characters climb into some wild vehicle to blast into the past or spin into the future. Once the characters have traveled through time, they grapple with what happens if you change the past or present based on information from the future, which is where time travel stories intersect with the idea of parallel universes or alternate timelines. And while the idea of time travel remains controversial, a few individuals unveiled to have experienced it firsthand. For instance, 2 reporters allegedly witnessed a significant news event before it actually occurred. A photographer and his partner leap forward in time and take some photos of the future. Are these time travel stories real or fake? Could time travel truly exist? Join us as we reveal the truth about time machines. The dream of traveling through time is both ancient and universal. The concept of time travel, moving through time the way we move through 3-dimensional space, has been confined to the realm of the human imagination for centuries, and more recently has made its mark in the landscape of science fiction books and films. However, our innate fascination with time travel also lies in several first-hand accounts. Among these accounts is the bewildering story of Thomas Johnson, who vanished from his own timeline only to reappear 60 years later in the future, and Mike Markham, an ambitious inventor who sought to conquer time itself. Mike "Madman" Markham attempted to construct a time machine on his front porch in Stanberry, Missouri, in early 1995. Age 21, as a student in electrical engineering, he started experimenting with a contraption called the Jacob's Ladder. The simple device sees an electric spark jumping back and forth between 2 parallel wires and appearing to climb up the ladder. As he was messing around with the device, Mike claimed he spotted something unusual. He said he spotted a circular vortex, so he decided to test the effect by throwing in a metal screw to see what would happen. He figured if he was going to rebuild the machine, he should use larger transformers to generate higher voltages. What he needed cost $20,000 each, so he decided to break into a local power station and steal 6 old transformers to continue his work. Once he connected the transformers to his Jacob's Ladder, he sparked a mass blackout on the streets in his neighborhood, shutting down the electrical grid for several hours. Cops soon turned up at his house with a warrant to search his property and arrested him for pinching the transformers. According to reports, Mike told the judge during his trial he was trying to find out winning lottery numbers in order to fund a research lab. Mike was released from prison several months later and shot to fame on local radio, telling stories about the disappearing screw and his plans to build a time machine. It was on Art Bell's radio show, which often focused on paranormal topics, that Art branded Mike a madman, and he adopted the name. The radio station's website even documents the bizarre story of Madman Mike. While on air, Mike explained to Art and his listeners how he didn't have any cash or spare parts to continue with his experiments. He shared his phone number live on air and allegedly received non-stop calls for the next 3 days. With his listeners' donations, his next time machine project was bigger and more powerful than the previous one. And he wanted to test the machine on himself by creating an electromagnetic vortex big enough for a human to walk into. He appeared on the radio station a year later, and when asked what he would take with him into the time machine, he said he would only take his phone. During his appearance on the show in 1996, he said he was 30 days away from finishing off his legal time machine. But he suddenly disappeared in 1997 and was never heard from again, leaving him at the center of one of the biggest time travel mysteries. Shortly after he vanished, a listener on the radio show called in to talk about a bizarre story he had found. The listener said in the 1930s, cops found a dead man on a beach in California. Notably, the man was crushed to death in a strange metal tube, and a mysterious device was found near his body which looked very much like a mobile phone. In many sources, this is where Mike's story concludes. But in 2015, Mike appeared to resurface online and rubbished wild claims he had traveled to the 1930s and died. And according to reports, his local radio station interviewed him for a third time in 2015. Under the username Reappeared Markham, Mike appeared to post on a blog about paranormal activities in February. The user has been a member of the site since 2015. He wrote,
"Rumors are ablazing that I am dead, not well, and had time traveled to 1930, something where I died on a beach in a tube. Whoever posted those pictures of a redhead, that is also not me. It was some school kid with my name that someone long ago attributed to me. Whatever was found in the 1930s was not me, and I've read that was debunked but can't find the article."
When someone asked whether he had any new time machine plans in motion, Mike replied,
"Yes, but it is stalled at the moment until I get some inverters. I have some 24-volt panels in my bus for a project. They got a little ratty from sitting outside for a bit."
His followers have asked the blog user to prove he's the real Mike Madman, but so far he's offered no evidence of his true identity. It remains a mystery as to whether Mike simply changed his name and decided to live a quiet life away from the public eye, or whether his time machine project was truly a success. Only Madman Mike knows the truth. Nevertheless, the void left by his absence since then has only served to amplify the legend of his time machine, leaving many to debate about the thin line between genius and madness. Markham's quest for time travel remains a captivating chapter in the history of time travel lore and informs our reflections about the subject to this day. Notably, besides the intrigue surrounding Journey Beyond the Bounds of Time, Mike Markham's time travel, we also have a bewildering story of Thomas Johnson, who vanished from his own timeline only to reappear 60 years later in the future. In July of 1912, on a tranquil farm in New York City, the lives of Thomas Johnson and his family were shattered by an event that defied explanation. The Johnsons led a simple life made by hard work. Meanwhile, a young Thomas, aged around 10, found himself irresistibly drawn to the lake on their farm. Despite his father's stern warnings, rooted in tales of animals vanishing near the water body, Thomas's fascination would soon be his undoing. One fateful day, Thomas ventured far closer to the lake than ever before. As he approached the forbidden waters, his friends watched in awe as a whirlpool surfaced from the once still lake to swallow Thomas whole and disappear back into stillness, leaving no trace of the 10-year-old farm boy behind. Thus began the exhaustive search for Thomas. Weeks of searching became months, which became years, with each passing day deepening the scar left upon his family by his loss. Thomas's father was often seen standing at the lake, silently witnessing the place that took his son from him. 60 years passed of being burdened by the guilt and grief of losing Thomas. It was then that the lake decided to reveal its secret. In July of 1970, a whirlpool akin to the one that had taken Thomas 60 years earlier was seen forming on the lake's surface. However, this time, it returned Thomas, practically unaged, to his now 91-year-old father and to a world that had moved on without him. This extraordinary incident raises deep questions about the true nature of time and reality. Thomas returned to his family 60 years after mysteriously disappearing as a 15-year-old. The authorities, upon confirming Thomas's identity, were left scratching their heads at this mystery that seemed to challenge the laws of nature as we know them. This case then attracted so much attention that both Thomas and his father decided to move and change their identity. The child never wanted to reveal what he saw or lived in that period of time. Could it have been Thomas Johnson, a victim of an extraterrestrial abduction? Or had Thomas traveled through an invisible time portal to a place where time passed more slowly than on Earth? We don't know. Regardless, one thing is for sure. Thomas and Markham's quests for time travel continue to inspire curiosity and debate about the possibilities of time travel and the limits of human ingenuity. Imagine that you possess the power to traverse the corridors of time, to step back into the historic past or forward into any possible future. Where will you go? Or more precisely, when will you go? That is, when, in ancient history or the potential future, will you travel to? Obviously, many people are fascinated by the idea of changing the past or seeing the future before it's due. But when questions of science and philosophy inevitably come up in the exploration of time travel, it has tended to also open up questions on the nature of reality. Scientifically speaking, the concept of time travel is linked with the theory of relativity, which tells us that the physical realities of space-time can be warped under certain conditions, theoretically allowing for travel across different times. However, the concept remains only theoretical to this day, due to the vast amount of energy required and the several paradoxes which open up as a consequence. Regardless, one thing can't deny: science does support some amount of time bending. Physicist Albert Einstein developed his theory of special relativity in 1905. Along with his later expansion, the theory of general relativity, it has become one of the foundational tenets of modern physics. Special relativity describes the relationship between space and time for objects moving at constant speeds in a straight line. The short version of the theory is deceptively simple. First, all things are measured in relation to something else. That is to say, there is no absolute frame of reference. Second, the speed of light is constant. It stays the same no matter what, and no matter where it's measured from. And third, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. From those simple tenets unfolds actual, real-life time travel. An observer traveling at high velocity will experience time at a slower rate than an observer who isn't speeding through space. While we don't accelerate humans to near light speed, we do send them swinging around the planet at 28,160 kilometers per hour aboard the International Space Station. Astronaut Scott Kelly was born after his twin brother and fellow astronaut, Mark Kelly. Scott Kelly spent 520 days in orbit, while Mark logged 54 days in space. The difference in the speed at which they experienced time over the course of their lifetimes has actually widened the age gap between the two men. As Mark Kelly said in a panel discussion on July 12, 2020, "So, whereas I used to be just 6 minutes older, now I am 6 minutes and 5 milliseconds older. Now, I've got that over his head." The difference that low Earth orbit makes in an astronaut's lifespan may be negligible, better suited for jokes among siblings than actual life extension or visiting the distant future. But the dilation in time between people on Earth and GPS satellites flying through space does make a difference. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, helps us know exactly where we are by communicating with a network of a few dozen satellites positioned in a high Earth orbit. The satellites circle the planet from 20,100 kilometers away, moving at 14,000 kilometers per hour. According to special relativity, the faster an object moves relative to another object, the slower that first object experiences time. For GPS satellites with atomic clocks, this effect cuts 7 microseconds, or 7 millionths of a second, off each day, according to the American Physical Society publication Physics Central. Then, according to general relativity, clocks closer to the center of a large gravitational mass, like Earth, tick more slowly than those farther away. So, because the GPS satellites are much farther from the center of Earth compared to clocks on the surface, Physics Central added, that adds another 45 microseconds onto the GPS satellite clocks each day. Combined with the -7 microseconds from the special relativity calculation, The net result is an added 38 microseconds. This means that in order to maintain the accuracy needed to pinpoint your car or phone, or since the system is run by the US Department of Defense, a military drone, engineers must account for an extra 38 microseconds in each satellite's day. The atomic clocks on board don't tick over to the next day until they have run 38 microseconds longer than comparable clocks on Earth. Given those numbers, it would take more than 7 years for the atomic clock in a GPS satellite to unsync itself from an Earth clock by more than a blink of an eye. We did the math. If you estimate a blink to last at least 100,000 microseconds, as the Harvard database of useful biological numbers does, it would take thousands of days for those 38 microsecond shifts to add up. This kind of time travel may seem as negligible as the Kelly brothers' age gap, but given the hyper-accuracy of modern GPS technology, it actually does matter. If it can communicate with the satellites whizzing overhead, your phone can nail down your location in space and time with incredible accuracy. According to NASA, general relativity might also provide scenarios that could allow travelers to go back in time. But the physical reality of those time travel methods is no piece of cake. Wormholes are theoretical tunnels through the fabric of space-time that could connect different moments or locations in reality to others. Also known as Einstein-Rosen bridges or white holes, as opposed to black holes, speculation about wormholes abounds. But despite taking up a lot of space or space-time in science fiction, no wormholes of any kind have been identified in real life. Primordial wormholes are predicted to be just 10 to the power of -33 centimeters at the tunnel's mouth. Previously, they were expected to be too unstable for anything to be able to travel through them. However, a study claims that this is not the case. The theory, which suggests that wormholes could work as viable space-time shortcuts, was described by physicist Pascal Koirin. As part of the study, Koirin used the Eddington-Finkelstein metric, as opposed to the Schwarzschild metric, which has been used in the majority of previous analyses. In the past, the path of a particle could not be traced through a hypothetical wormhole. However, using the Eddington-Finkelstein metric, the physicist was able to achieve just that. Koirin's paper was described in October 2021 in the preprint database Archive, before being published in the Journal of Modern Physics D. Koirin found that by using the Eddington-Finkelstein metric, he could more easily trace the path of a particle through a hypothetical wormhole. He found that the particle can cross the event horizon, enter the wormhole tunnel, and escape through the other side, all in a finite amount of time. The Eddington-Finkelstein metric didn't misbehave at any point in that trajectory. Does this mean that Einstein-Rosen bridges are stable? Not quite. General relativity only tells us about the behavior of gravity and not the other forces of nature. Thermodynamics, which is the theory of how heat and energy act, for example, tells us that white holes are unstable. And if physicists tried to manufacture a black hole-white hole combination in the real universe using real materials, other math suggests the energy densities would break everything apart. However, Koirin's result is still interesting because it points out that wormholes aren't quite as catastrophic as they first appeared, and that there may be stable paths through wormhole tunnels, perfectly allowed by general relativity. If only they could get us to grandmas faster. While Einstein's theories appear to make time travel difficult, some researchers have proposed other solutions that could allow jumps back and forth in time. These alternate theories share one major flaw. As far as scientists can tell, there's no way a person could survive the kind of gravitational pulling and pushing that each solution requires. Astronomer Frank Tipler proposed a mechanism, sometimes known as a Tipler cylinder, where one could take matter that is 10 times the sun's mass, then roll it into a very long but very dense cylinder. The Anderson Institute, a time travel research organization, described the cylinder as a black hole that has passed through a spaghetti factory. According to the Anderson Institute, after spinning this black hole spaghetti a few billion revolutions per minute, a spaceship nearby, following a very precise spiral around the cylinder, could travel backward in time on a closed, time-like curve. The major problem is that in order for the Tipler cylinder to become reality, the cylinder would need to be infinitely long or be made of some unknown kind of matter. At least for the foreseeable future, endless interstellar pasta is beyond our reach. Theoretical physicist Amos Ori at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa, Israel, proposed a model for a time machine made out of curved space-time, a donut-shaped vacuum surrounded by a sphere of normal matter. In the words of Ori, the machine is space-time itself. If we were to create an area with a warp like this in space that would enable timelines to close on themselves, it might enable future generations to return to visit our time. However, note that there are a few caveats to Ori's time machine. First, visitors to the past wouldn't be able to travel to times earlier than the invention and construction of the time donut. Second, and more importantly, the invention and construction of this machine would depend on our ability to manipulate gravitational fields at will, a feat that may be theoretically possible but is certainly beyond our immediate reach. In addition, as you know, time travel has long occupied a significant place in fiction. Since as early as the Mahabharata, an ancient Sanskrit epic poem compiled around 400 BC, humans have dreamed of warping time. Lisa Yazek, a professor of science fiction studies at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, told Live Science, "Every work of time travel fiction creates its own version of space-time, glossing over one or more scientific hurdles and paradoxes to achieve its plot requirements. Whether you prefer phone booths, cars, or wearable devices, surely there is a time machine out there for you." We've gathered some of the top time machines from science fiction in all their wibbly, wobbly, timey-wimey glory. TARDIS, Doctor Who. Perhaps the most famous of time machines, the TARDIS, time and relative dimension in space, which is disguised as a police phone booth, allows Doctor Who and his companions to jump across eras on planet Earth. In the new series, they've met many historical figures using this machine, such as the artist Vincent van Gogh and writers Agatha Christie and Charles Dickens. Doctor Who often uses the TARDIS to try to change events in time with varying success. DeLorean, Back to the Future. In the Back to the Future trilogy, the DeLorean can travel to a time you punch into the car's dashboard as long as the vehicle reaches 88 miles per hour and has sufficient power. This leads to several complications for the characters, however, when they run out of the plutonium that is usually used to power the vehicle. Much of the first movie revolves around finding an alternative source of power. Klingon bird of prey. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. While the characters in Star Trek the original series are no stranger to time travel, it is in the film Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, that they do one of their most famous maneuvers with a captured Klingon bird of prey, a slingshot around the sun to nab humpback whales from the 20th century. The Enterprise crew pioneered the Manuweaver with the U.S. Enterprise, which we also think is an awesome time machine, in the classic first season episode Tomorrow is Yesterday. The crew's escapades in 1980s San Francisco include Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, mastering the use of colorful metaphor, swearing, and explaining the behavior of Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy, by saying Spock used too much LDS a few years ago. Complicated contraption, The Time Machine. Based on the 1895 H.G. Wells novel, this 2002 movie shows Alexander Hartdegen, Guy Pearce, sitting in a complicated device of wheels, levers, and light to travel 800,000 years into the future. He planned to test this device to save somebody he loved, but his first flight plunges him into a war he is not prepared to fight. Phone Booth, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. In perhaps the best method ever to get a school assignment done, slackers Bill Preston, Alex Winter, and Ted Logan, Keanu Reeves, use a phone booth to travel back in time and get some first-hand knowledge of historical figures. But things take an unexpected turn when an explosion knocks Napoleon Bonaparte into their wake, dragging the French leader from Austria in 1805 to Southern California in 1988. 10 space movies to watch in 2015. Time displacement equipment, the Terminator movie series. Demonstrating how a war can be fought in 4 dimensions, yes, including time. The time displacement equipment is a central part of the Terminator film series. At various moments, different factions in the war between humans and machines use the equipment to send their agents backward or forward in time. The device looks like a big gyroscope, and travelers must be specially coded before entering for it to work properly. Rocket sled, time cop. While time travel movies introduce all sorts of paradoxes, the rocket sled in Time Cop, 1994, has an unusual one. The device appears to vanish every time users climb into it and careen toward a wall. But when riders goes back to where they came from, they magically appear in the sled again. This phenomenon has spawned much speculation on the internet. Time Turner, Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban. This innocent-looking pendant is used by Hermione Granger, Emma Watson, to gain more time for her studies. After special approval from a professor at the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, she uses the device to regularly jump back a few hours in time to take extra classes. Hermione keeps the device secret from her friends Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, and Ron Weasley, Rupert Grint, until it comes in handy for a rescue mission. The Island, Lost. Lost is one of those television shows in which nobody really knows what's going on. But a few seasons in, it becomes clear that the island on which the travelers are stranded has time travel properties, which are sometimes activated via a frozen wheel. But their attempts to change the past usually succeed only in bringing about the same events via other means. Time jump device. Men in Black 3. While time travel is illegal in the Men in Black universe, there are concerns that criminals could use the technology to their advantage. It ends up playing a key role in the plot of Men in Black 3, 2012, which includes extensive references to the Apollo 11 launch of July 16, 1969. The handheld device can be activated by falling with it to the ground from a height. Wayback Machine, the Rocky and Bullwinkle Show. This time machine was actually invented by a dog, the super genius Mr. Peabody, for his pet human boy Sherman. The duo travel in the time machine together to see important events in history, such as the famous charge of the Light Brigade during the Crimean War in 1854. The Wayback Machine website on the internet is an homage to Waback, which, in turn, was inspired by the popular Univasi computers of the 1960s. Unnamed device, Primer. The time machine in the 2004 movie Primer was originally used by the characters to try to make money in the stock market. However, another person discovers the time machine and gets ill from the effects of it, casting doubt on its utility. Cosmic Treadmill, The Flash. In perhaps the ultimate inspiration to exercise, this treadmill will take you back in time, but only if you go at superhuman speed. In one famous comic book, Barry Allen uses the device to go to the 25th century to encounter Professor Zoom, a noted villain in the DC universe. After all, it's no surprise that we continue to daydream about having the freedom to move through time just as we move through space. As Clifford Johnson, a physicist at the University of Southern California, says, "Time is embedded in everything we do. It looms large in how we perceive the world. So being able to mess with time, I'm not surprised we're obsessed with that and fantasize about it." That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.